Good morning. Thank you all for joining us on International Day for Persons with Disabilities. My name is Susan Lang. I am the founding president and CEO of Lyme Connect. I am a white woman. I have dark blonde hair that's chin length, and I have on a black dress. A few housekeeping details regarding the webinar. We do have live captioning available, and we're also offering French translation. When you go down to the toolbar at the bottom, you should see a globe, or you'll see it momentarily. If you click on that, you'll be able to add French. And if you have a question that you'd like to pose to either Tom or Varun, you can add that to the Q&A panel, and that will be addressed at the end. So to get started, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. This is an acknowledgement of the land on which our Toronto office is located. For those of you who are not familiar, land acknowledgement is an Indigenous tradition and one that many people in Canada and the US have adopted in the spirit of reconciliation with the Indigenous people. So I'd like to acknowledge that our session today is coming in part from Toronto, which is in the dish with one spoon territory. The dish with one spoon territory, or excuse me, the dish with one spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So the annual observance of the United Nations International Day of Persons with Disabilities aims to promote an understanding and increase awareness of the experiences of people with disabilities around the world. The UN has identified leadership and participation of persons with disabilities towards an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable post-COVID-19 world as their theme for this year, 2021. We at Lyme Connect have chosen Voices of Lyme, a chat about leadership and disability as our 2021 theme. Every day we see leaders within our Lyme Connect community who are tapping into the strengths and skills that they have developed as a result of, not in spite of, living with their disabilities and creating a more accessible and inclusive world for all. It was in this spirit that our Tom Wilson Leadership and Disability Award was created to recognize a young professional who was rebranding disability through achievement. We are thrilled to have our board chairman emeritus, Tom Wilson, with us today to speak with the inaugural recipient of this award, who is Varun Chandak. And just a little bit of background on Tom, I will acknowledge him as our inaugural advocate and supporter back in 2006 when Lyme Connect was just a dream. And we would not be here without Tom today and without his advocacy. So Tom, as always, I'll thank you and I'll turn the program over to you.
Susan, thank you so much. And it's great to be here with everybody today. Thank you for joining us. I am Tom Wilson. I am a white male. I have short gray hair and wear glasses, and I'm speaking to you today from my den in my home, and I'm thrilled to be with you. Born in India, Varun moved to Canada to pursue his MBA at University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management in 2016. While at Rotman, he was recognized for his leadership and community engagement, in part for founding the not-for-profit Access to Success that supports MBA students with disabilities in various ways, including scholarships. Varun happens to have both visible and non-visible disabilities, so he understands the challenges and strengths that come with disabilities. Varun, congratulations on being the inaugural winner, and I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to delve into the topic of leadership with you today. Varun, it's great to be with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
Let's begin our discussion. And as was mentioned, there'll be opportunities for the audience to ask questions directly after we speak for a little bit. We learned a little bit about you in the introduction, but I'd like the audience to get a chance to know you a little better. Can you tell us about your experience with disabilities and how they have led you to take such an active leadership role in supporting others with disabilities?
Of course, thank you for the question. So, hi everyone. I'm a young male of South Indian origin, of South Asian origin. I'm wearing a black full long sleeve shirt and black glasses, and I have sharp black hair. I've got a virtual background on, which says ATS Labs 2021 in a corner. So to your question, Tom, just to set a little bit of context, as I said, I'm the founder of Access to Success, and our mission is to support the development of future leaders with disabilities and assistive technology. I have a couple of disabilities. I'm hard of hearing, so I wear a hearing aid in my right ear, and I have what's called Erb's palsy, which is a form of partial paralysis in my left arm. So those experiences, I didn't really think about them at all while I was in India. And then I came to Canada for my MBA at the University of Toronto in 2016, which is where I saw this immense discussion around diversity and inclusion. And I noticed that disability was not really a part of the conversation at the time. So looking back at my own experiences as a young kid with a disability, and I remember that I used to, at the time, look up if there are successful corporate leaders who identify as having a disability. I didn't have a lot of very ambitious plans for my career. I just wanted a regular but successful corporate career. And at the time, there was nothing like that. So that sort of context helped me come up with the idea of Access to Success, which started off by supporting Rotman's MBA students who identify as having a disability, and then just sort of grew from there. With the hearing loss, it sort of resulted in an experience where ever since I got diagnosed with hearing loss, I dreamt that in the future, there would be contact lenses that would use artificial reality to give me live captions whenever somebody in front of me speaks. So we realized that everything that we had put together with Access to Success, while my contact lenses dream is still a ways away, we realized that we can use those resources to make a lot of other dreams that these entrepreneurs are working on. We can help those dreams come true.
Thank you. Varun, we're thrilled to have you as our initial Lyme Connect Leader and Disability recipient. And in that, you had indicated that you would use this opportunity to rally more people to the importance of building a pipeline of future leaders with disabilities. Why do you think leadership is such an important area of focus?
Of course. So again, to set a little bit of context, Access to Success provides the Access to Success Fellowship, which offers up to $90,000 in annual scholarships for MBA students at 4 of Canada's top business schools, MBA students who identify as having a disability. And we started this because we believe in the importance of representation. As I shared in my personal story, I used to look up for regular people, so-called regular people who happen to have a disability and have successful corporate careers. At the time, I didn't really see that. So we thought that, well, we need to fix that. And yet, at the same time, leadership isn't something that just happens overnight. You aren't just doing something one day and the next morning you wake up and suddenly you're a leader. It's something that evolves over time. It's something that I noticed in my own personal story as well, because even now, for example, I was recently asked to deliver a guest lecture on inclusive design at the University of Toronto. And my response was, in my head, I went, with me? Why? So we thought that because of those experiences, we need to build that pipeline by supporting those future leaders when they are, let's say, MBA students. MBA students, they're ready to re-enter the workforce when they graduate and middle management roles, on track for senior management roles. So by supporting those students when they are MBA students, we would end up building that pipeline of leaders, which is so critically important for representation. And that's where organizations like Access to Success, like Lyme Connect, and all of the incredible resources that are available at Lyme Connect, that's where our efforts sort of come in.
Well, we greatly appreciate your personal leadership, and we can already see that it's impacting lives. For those who are joining who are looking for ways to support people with disabilities, whether it's their employees, their friends, or their family, what's your advice for creating an environment or relationships that enable leaders with disabilities to flourish?
So, well, the good news is if the people listening in, if you're here, you're already doing more than what a vast majority of people are doing, which is trying to learn. In my opinion, that trying to learn, that curiosity about disability inclusion, that wish to understand how to be a better ally for people with disabilities, that's, I think, the first step in fostering an environment that supports the development of leaders with disabilities. The second thing I would say is don't make assumptions about the capabilities of people with disabilities. I may be preaching to the choir here, but to share just a small example from my own personal life. I think I can now say that I'm fairly capable. I can say I'm smart. And yet, when I was looking for jobs and interviews would call me on my phone, because I'm hard of hearing and I lip read, I can't understand anything on the phone. And when those interviewers would ask me questions on the phone, I wouldn't be able to answer them well because I couldn't understand what the interviewer was saying. So it resulted in the assumption that I'm not smart enough. And this is despite me requesting video calls. So I wouldn't make those assumptions. The last and maybe the most important thing, I think, is to create a space that encourages people with disabilities to speak up and flourish as leaders. This last part is easier said than done. The first thing here is within this creating that safe space, an easy, relatively easy way, and especially in the corporate setup, is for senior leaders and let's say people leaders, people managers who identify as having a disability and are comfortable sharing that they have a disability. It's important for them to speak up because when they speak up and they share their personal stories, they set a tone. They set a tone that says it's okay to disclose, it's okay to share your personal life, your personal stories. And that sort of gives almost a sense of safety and security to those who might be a little bit earlier on in their professional lives. Then the second thing here again is you gotta recognize and reward the efforts of leaders with disabilities. It's important that when people, seniors and the managers and organizations and larger organizations, when they see young professionals trying to make efforts for disability inclusion or whatever else for that matter, it's important to recognize and reward that. That sort of gives them the confidence to continue doing what they're doing. And the last thing is to give a chance to emerging leaders. Very often, it's the same set of people, amazing people, who are invited for a lot of engagements, a lot of, let's say, speaking engagements or a lot of initiatives. And that's important. But at the same time, I think it's also important to give a shot to young and emerging leaders who are just starting out, because when they get that platform, they can do a lot more with that platform.
True. And certainly, Varun, we're thrilled with the way that you've led by example in that space. Let me just remind everybody that we're going to open this up for Q&A in a few minutes, and that as Renee's indicating, we encourage you to put questions you might have where indicated. We look forward to this dialogue, Varun. We greatly appreciate your insights. You'd indicated that one of the goals of the organization you founded, Access to Success, is to help accessibility tech scale. Why is this so important?
So in the beginning, I shared very briefly that story about me wishing for contact lenses, which would use artificial reality to give me live captions. Now, while that is not there, what does exist today is live captions. Now, let me again just start off with a bit of a personal example. If the pandemic had happened 5 years ago, I have no idea how I would have managed. in the world of masks where I cannot lip read. I may have only 40% hearing loss, but my verbal comprehension is about 10 to 20% in both ears. So when somebody puts on a mask and I can't lip read, I can't understand anything. Now imagine me trying to do my job in a situation such as this. It's pretty much impossible. In some cases, or maybe in a lot of cases, technology fixes that. It fixes that mismatched interaction between me and accessibility or lack thereof. So when I have live captions available, I can understand what's being said in the room and do my job a lot better. I'm a lot more productive. I'm a lot more efficient. That live captioning only happened in 2017, believe it or not. And I know this because I was looking for it in 2016 and it did not exist. So by supporting the development and scaling of accessibility technology, it enables people to do their jobs better. It opens up more employment opportunities, better employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And when they actually get that opportunity, they're able to leverage that opportunity and do a lot better in the course of their job. It also means that the quality of life is a lot better. If I'm going to a grocery store and I can't talk to the cashier, it results in a very embarrassing moment, sometimes almost, if I'm being honest. So, but if I can use my live captioning app, it means that I don't have to face that. So my quality of life is better. And that example gets sort of repeated over and over and over again. Innovation and supporting innovation like that, it sort of actually ends up turning into a bit of a self-reinforcing positive feedback loop. It's a lot of 9-point words in there, but what that means is when we support innovation like that, it means there's more options, there's lower cost, there's wider distribution, which means more availability, and there's higher visibility. So when that sort of happens, people see the success that's happening. But when we support accessibility startups receive success, more people start entering the space. So ultimately, it's a sort of keeps on benefiting itself. That's what our organization does with ATS Labs, which is Canada's first accelerator for accessibility, mental health, and aging tech startups. We just concluded a 3-month program this year where 10 startups participated and they received access to 45 sessions hosted by 50 speakers from 7 countries. And all of this is sort of coming together to support the development and scaling of accessibility tech.
Varun, that's fascinating. So tech innovation is an incredibly important catalyst for what you see as a virtuous cycle that can continue on for some time. I'm curious where you'd say, where are we on that curve? Are we still in the very early stages, or how much progress has been made so far, in your opinion?
That's a great question. So we started the idea of ATS Labs in 2019 with a pilot project, a boot camp, which was intended to validate if there's a demand for this program. And when we were doing that, and we went and spoke with a lot of accessibility startups, one of the responses I got from an established, well-known accessibility advocate, in fact, was that if you want to do something for accessibility startups in Canada, you're not going to find 10 startups for your program. You won't find 20 startups in all of Canada. That was the response from somebody who's been in this space. So we went and did the research. We identified well over 100 startups that are currently active in Canada in the accessibility, mental health, and aging tech space. They have raised in total cumulatively over $155 million in funding and grants. They employ over 1,600 people in Canada alone by our estimates. The space is deeper than you might think. Then, taking this to a bit of a broader level, over the last 2 years, mental health came to the fore because a lot of people over the course of the pandemic realized that, wait a second, mental health is not a disability issue. It's an everybody issue. Mental health affects everyone. And investors started noticing that. So millions and millions of dollars have flown into mental health startups over the last 2 years. Now we are at the cusp of the same thing happening in digital accessibility because of the Accessible Canada Act, similar act in the US, because those acts are now coming into force. So digital accessibility startups have now seen hundreds of millions of dollars flow into them. I believe the next step here is the generalized accessibility, mental health, and aging tech landscape, because the next realization, my belief is that people are going to realize, wait a second, accessibility is not a disability issue. It is an everybody issue.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a fascinating perspective, and it's very encouraging because it seems like the years ahead could be very exciting times in this space. Thank you for your perspectives on that. Varun, it's been great to hear you speak about your journey and your vision. We've got a great group that's joined us today, and we're going to hear from them with some of their questions very shortly. But what advice would you have for them to harness their own leadership skills to promote inclusion?
So I'd like to begin by clarifying that leadership can mean different things to different people. Leadership doesn't always mean starting a startup, starting an organization, doing something at a global stage. That's not necessarily true. So with that context, let me sort of break it down into three stages almost. There's for folks who are here and who are already comfortable and who have found their voice, who are comfortable speaking up, publicly identifying as a leader, as a person with a disability. Obviously, it's important to keep doing what you're doing, but also to scale it by partnering with a lot of other organizations. There's a lot of opportunities that can be unlocked if you take what you're doing on your own and do it in collaboration with a lot of other organizations. And that's why that's the whole story of Access to Success and Lime Connect, because I love the fact that we've been collaborating for so many years now. There's also additional opportunities that these folks can unlock. For example, again, at Lime Connect, you have the Next Gen Board. There is the In the Limelight contest. These are all opportunities to sort of scale and blow up your platform to make it a lot bigger and reach a lot more people. So that's for people who are already there, who are already ready. Excuse me. The next, though, is people who are curious, who don't know yet. Am I ready? To them, I would say, give it a shot. It's like trying on a glove. Maybe the glove might fit. If the glove fits, you might actually end up enjoying it. You can start off by, let's say, volunteering at any number of disability-related organizations. You could participate in the employee resource groups. If you work in a large company and they have an ERG, consider starting your own ERG. There's a lot of small things that you can do to sort of get a feel for what this looks like, and that is also leadership. But the last thing that I want to point out is that not everybody has to be a leader. It's okay if you don't want to be a leader in the disability space. It's okay if you don't want to publicly disclose and point out and do things in the disability space. It is not everybody's responsibility. The world can't just look to every person who identifies as having a disability and expect them to do things for disability inclusion. It's okay to want to live your own life and maybe become a leader in a lot of other areas, your professional life, your academic life. It could be anything. And I want to just say to those folks that if you feel like that, it's perfectly okay.
Thank you for that distinction. And certainly here at Lime Connect, we want to support folks wherever they are on their journey. And I really appreciate that perspective that people are in different places and different people can contribute in many, many different ways. That's so true. Varun, I know there's been some activity and some questions in the chat. I'm going to see if Renee is going to join us and moderate some of those questions so that they can have benefit of asking you some things directly. Thank you, Renee.
Absolutely. And thank you, Tom and Varun. This has been a great conversation so far. And we do have some activity in the chat. Varun, I'm going to build on sort of what you were just talking about with this question from one of our network members, Sharik. who is an incoming analyst at a consulting firm and looking to spearhead the conversation about disability inclusion effectively in his workplace. The organization he's joining doesn't have an employee resource group for people with disabilities at the moment, and he'd appreciate any advice you can share for a young professional entering the corporate space for the first time who is driven to help lead this process. So kind of building on that last question.
I love that you're excited and interested about doing this. That's fantastic. I always love that when that happens. So I think the first step would be to talk to your manager. It sounds very corporate-ish, but it's true, because as a young professional, somebody just entering the workspace, there's always a lot of nuances, a lot of red tape, almost in a way that we might not be aware of. So the easiest step is to talk to your manager and see maybe what already exists. What is the process for doing something like that? Chances are, for most ERGs, you usually need what's called an executive champion, where you need somebody who's very senior in the company to stand up and say, I will support this ERG, this employee resource group, and I will serve as the champion. So to get to that point, it takes a little bit of time, and you need the support of your managers, other senior leaders. So once you start the conversation with the manager, I would also go and talk to any other more senior professionals who are in your network in your company, who you are comfortable sharing this with, and asking for their thoughts as well. And once you start having those conversations a little bit more by more, it will sort of build a bit of momentum, and you'll start finding the answers to what you need to do specifically in your company, in your organization, to build an ERG. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, very good insights and suggestions. Thank you. Another question is, how do we center disability in conversations concerning diversity, equity, and inclusion? By that, I mean, what does it look like to center disability to consider broader representations of diversity, race, gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status, etc.? I like this question very much because I do feel like disability is sometimes left out of the broader diversity conversation. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sorry, I must ask for a clarification. I didn't follow the captions entirely. The question is about how do you center disability when there's all this conversation about other aspects of diversity? Is that the gist of it?
I think it's the gist that I'm picking up here is that how do you make sure that disability is part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation? Sometimes you'll hear, people, their company diversity statements where they're really focusing more maybe on race or gender, and disability is either an afterthought or maybe left out altogether. So how do we make sure that disability is represented? And hopefully I am representing that question right from the person who asked it.
No, thank you for clarifying that. I think that's super clear. So it's interesting because it's very similar to my own experience when I was an MBA student, which is exactly what happened there. We in fact had at the University of Toronto, at the Rutman School of Management, when I started, we had an entire day in our week-long orientation dedicated to diversity and inclusion. And everything was discussed that I can think of except disability, which was not even brought up at the time. So for me personally, I happen to be a little bit of a more action-oriented person. So when I see something, when I see a gap, when I see something that needs to be fixed, I just try to think about what can be done to fix it. So what I did, and it's something that I think I can sort of share as a suggestion, is wherever you see, let's say it's in your company or organization or whatever it is, go and talk to the people involved. Talk to the people who make the call on these conversations. So what I did was I went to Rutman's administration, and I literally asked, hey, I noticed this, what's up? And they said, it's a good point. What do you want to do about it? Now, sometimes it's not our responsibility to go and fix it. In my case, I thought, hey, I'm young, I have a little bit of time. What can I do to fix it? So I sort of came up with that sort of action plan almost, that here's XYZ things that we can do to fix it. And I took it back to Rutman, and they said, we love this. We'll do everything you want to support this. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is especially from my perspective, if you see the need for a change around there, why don't you go out and try and do something about it? It's not always feasible, in which case you gotta go and find partners, other advocates, other allies who can come in and step up as well. Where possible, I tend to sort of take action and just try and do something to make a dent.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think that kind of addresses some of the other question that we have here, which was asked early on. And it's about making sure that disabled people have more opportunities to speak and increase the profile of the disability community. The early part of this question references that sometimes panels on disability engage allies or employers or parents of people with disabilities. And this person is asking about how to make sure that the voice of the people with disabilities is actually represented. So any thoughts you have, any further thoughts you have on that?
That is a critically important point, and thank you to whoever brought that up. I talked earlier about the importance of tech, about innovation, but none of that works if people with disabilities, the community is not involved. It's sort of irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's not going to work if people with disabilities are not involved. And the same thing applies to all of these conversations like panels or events or whatever it is. And if you see something like that happening where there's a conversation about disability and there's nobody with a disability talking on there, what I would do is call it out. I try to do it a little bit less in a little bit less of a confrontational manner and more of a conversational manner, because I want a dialogue. I don't want people to get defensive and say, oh, I don't know, we'll handle it as a corporate apology. I want to use that opportunity to kickstart a conversation and say, hey, I noticed this. What can we do differently? Here's a list of people that maybe might be helpful if you are considering an event on disability. Here's a list of speakers who are amazing and who would have been great for this event. So in short, I would use that opportunity to kickstart a conversation and to call out when these things happen.
Absolutely. And we have some comments in here. Nothing about us without us.
That's right.
More of a direction towards diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which we're seeing that more often now, adding the belonging. That's this person's saying that's becoming a response to the exclusion of disability in DEI. So that's an interesting perspective. I think we've addressed really most of the questions here. So Tom, if you'd like to, let me see, I have one new message. Okay, one more question, and then Tom, I'll bring you back on and we will wrap it up. Can you comment on where you would see opportunities for those with neurodiversity, specifically autism spectrum disorder, to be part of this movement to improve disability technology? This person has a son who's interested in becoming an engineering technologist and wants to make a difference for those in the community. How can he engage with startups working in the disability space?
That is great. I'm so excited for you. That's fantastic. Why don't you reach out to me? My email is varun@accesstosuccess.ca. I'm going to just send it in the chat as well. And anyone who's interested is welcome to reach out to me. There's a ton of people I can think of who you should talk to. There's startups, there's organizations, there's foundations. And literally yesterday, I had a call with somebody who's about to do something to promote exactly what you're talking about. Oh, thank you to Sydney for sending my email. So reach out to me, and there's a lot of interesting conversations that we can have. Before we wrap up here and go to Tom, there was one question that I think I noticed about in the chat about CART versus live captioning. So to clarify, what I was referring to was automatic AI-based live captioning. CART, which is manual captioning, has been in existence for a long, long time. Funnily enough, I actually learned about it the first time in 2016 when I came to Rutland. But CART, something like CART, is one fairly expensive. I've organized events and used CART, and I know that it's quite expensive. And second is, you can't really use that in impromptu situations, or where, let's say, like I said, you have to go to a grocery store and you can't understand the cashier. So tech like that, AI-based tech like that, and new innovations like that are instrumental in sort of improving a lot of experiences for people like me.
Terrific.
Thank you, Varun, for clarifying. I'm actually going to toss this question to both of you because I think it's a good question and it's an important one. And then you can have your last final comments, and then I will just close us out. The question in the Q&A was, would creating a business case on implementing diversity and inclusion be a possible path to convince management? So I think the business case, we are always talking about the business case for having a diverse workforce and including people with disabilities. So I think you both have sort of an interesting perspective on that. So I'll turn that back over to you.
Great. Varun, since you've been doing a lot of talking, I'll take a second to address that, and then would love your comments as well. I think the answer to that, first of all, is a huge yes. As somebody who has spent my career in the corporate setting and the last decade plus of it in talent roles, it's extraordinarily helpful to elevate the incredible opportunity when we address this very compelling business case. All of the data shows that this is an enormous untapped opportunity for businesses and employers, organizations everywhere. It demonstrates that there's transformational opportunities for businesses. Goes back to something you said, Varun, very early, that accessibility is not an issue just for people with disabilities. Accessibility is an enormous solution-driven opportunity that impacts everybody, and businesses innovate tremendously when they focus on accessibility. They benefit tremendously when they become a more inclusive employer. So building that business case, and it's something that we at Lime take very seriously and would be delighted to support, I think is a very high impact, a high value activity. Varun, love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
You're absolutely right, Tom. You hit the nail on the head there. Fortunately, like as I've noticed a few people mentioned in the chat said as well, there's a lot of research that has been done that proves the business case. And the good news is that companies are now beginning to take notice. So in addition to the Accenture research that was mentioned in the chat, Rich Donovan did a fantastic study on what he calls the return on disability, where he found that the size of the disability community almost as a market is the size of China, which is $1 trillion. So if you consider people with disabilities and our immediate friends and family, because we rely on them a lot of times, that market is $1 trillion market. It could be considered the last major untapped market left in the world, in generally speaking. So a lot of businesses are now beginning to take notice of that. A lot of businesses, especially when they look at, let's say, even philanthropy in the disability space, they look at even the return on their donation. They look at the ROI, the return on investment. They want to see that the dollars that they contribute to these things is actually moving the needle. So a lot of companies are taking notice. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, no doubt about that. But I think that business case is an absolutely critically important aspect, and people are now beginning to take notice.
There was a great comment in the chat just now that business case really needs to focus on the positive impact of business. I think that's a great point. Regardless of any dimension of diversity that we're talking about, and particularly with disability, you're not going to get it right with your clients if you don't get it right with your employees. You're not going to get it right with your employees if you're not getting it right with your clients. There's a great synergy going on there. So I totally agree that the opportunity for really positive business impact is enormous. Varun, this 45 minutes has flown by, and it's time to wrap up. First, I just want to thank you for all those terrific insights. We're so excited to see the path you're on, and we really appreciate the time that we've had together. You're exactly what we had in mind when we created this Leadership and Disability Award, and we're so thrilled that we had this time with you today. Any final comments from you before we turn back to Renee to close out?
I just wanted to thank you, Tom, Susan, everybody at Lime Connect for the opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you over the years, and I just can't wait to see what else we can do. And to everybody listening, the last thing I really want to say is, if you see the need for a change around here, now's the time to do it. With everything that we have, all the opportunities that we have available, there's never going to be a better time to take action. So I hope if there's one key takeaway, I hope that's the one you can take away from here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well said. Thank you. Renee.
Thank you. You're right. That time really flew by. Thank you, Tom, for moderating this discussion. It was really, I think we gained so many great insights. We're seeing so many positive comments. So thank you, Tom. Varun, as always, thank you. We look forward to our continued work together. For those of you joining, I put in our chat, please check out Lime Connect, www.limeconnect.com. If you are a person with a disability, please join our network, and we want to get to know you better. And if you are joining as just an ally, or you want to learn more about us, you can join as a friend of the Lime Network and stay connected with us. So this is a fantastic day, fantastic way to spend a Friday, and a great celebration of International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Varun, thank you. Tom, thank you. And thank you all for joining. There will be a recording. We will share it out after a few days after it's edited. Thank you all.